Ready to hand off to Houchin, who earned his spot on the final with the fastest split this morning on the U.S. court.
Here's another huge key leg for the United States. Baird was 47 flat this morning. You want to give him some cushion, and that's what he's doing.
Houchin has built the lead up to about 8/10. So going to be another gold in the men's 4x200 meter freestyle relay for the United States.
It's fun to be transported back to fun moments like that, right? And Rowdy Gaines has that excited voice that makes it even more fun to go back and visit those moments. I woke up this morning and I was thinking about that video and showing it with you guys and sharing it with you guys and connecting and identifying with you about that. What does that feel like? And the best that I could come up with, and I think it's applicable, is that level. So I spent 4 years swimming professionally, and that particular race was kind of the culmination of kind of pursuing mastery in swimming. And that was 4 years, 3 or 4 years after college, and I had kind of reached this plateau in swimming in college, and then I broke through and had 4 really great years professionally. And that breakthrough moment, if I can liken it to something that everybody here understands better than I do, is it was like the first time I started learning about Agile. And it was like, it took me from the old days where, okay, we had this whole thing mapped out and here's how it's gonna go for the next 9 months, 10 months, year, 4 years. And then what happens, 3 weeks later, who knows? And so when I read that stuff and when I started to learn how to implement it, and I don't write code, but when I started to learn how to implement it and be a part of these teams, it's like this is the same thing. We're iterating and we're going through these training cycles, right? And it doesn't stop there at kind of the moment of truth, that performance-oriented result. It's every day when you're training, and when you're with your team, you're discovering these problems, and the only way to uncover the next one is to kind of bite the bullet and embrace the one that you're in right now. I think that's a lot of fun, and that's the kind of mentality I've brought over to HydroXphere. And so thank you for having me today. Thank you to Philip, thank you to the AllSeen Alliance and the Linux Foundation. This is a lot of fun. I'm excited to kind of be a part of getting this week started right. So I'm here to inspire you. And we were macro a minute ago, and we're kind of micro now. And we have a particular use case, and it's out there. People are using it. People are walking around swimming pool decks right now, usually in the hot, humid sun in the summers. And they're using AllJoin. They're using an app. They are taking their fundamental human behavior, and it is colliding with this technology. And it's been a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to sharing it with you today. So first I want to tell you a story. It's applicable for all of us. Like any good story, it gets better as it ages and every time I get to share it. So let's kind of rewind the clock. And before we do, just a quick show of hands. Who's familiar with the swimming community? Maybe you have a relative that swims, and it could be at any level. Just kind of a quick show of hands. Anybody familiar with the swimming community? Great. So I went to the University of Michigan, and I was fortunate and I was lucky to. If you know anything about swimming, Michigan, the University of Michigan is kind of synonymous with Olympic prowess. When you're 8 years old and 10 years old growing up in swimming, you're dreaming. When you're dreaming, you're not thinking about last-minute buzzer beaters at NCAAs and busting brackets and Rose Bowls and things like that. You're thinking about making the Olympic team for your country, and you're thinking about winning an Olympic gold medal. That's the dream, right? So I get a call from the coach at the University of Michigan as a senior in high school, and I got to visit a lot of other great schools, but his vision was what my vision was, and collegiate swimming is incredible. and it was definitely a part of getting to the Olympics, but he was interested in putting guys on the Olympic team, and so I said, sign me up. So I went to Ann Arbor in 2006 and was there for 4 years competing with the University of Michigan. And there we had I'll make the claim that we had the best training group that had ever been assembled up until that point. And you can't make that claim this day and age in the sport unless your group includes a guy named Michael Phelps. Well, our group included a guy named Michael Phelps. So we had current or future, we had a dozen Olympians in that training group. Some were collegiate at the time and some were professional. And between those 12 swimmers, there was about 12 Olympic medals, either current or future. And that's if you don't count the 22 that Michael won on his own. So needless to say, it was a good group. And I thought I was fast as a senior in high school, and that got put into perspective very quickly when I was in a group like that. And the great part about it was the community. You know, I'm sitting here and I'm having these flashbacks of thinking about these stories, these little anecdotal, funny things, and it's all about how we interacted. And it was usually at the pool, but it was all relational for me. It was getting to be a part of that swimming community was this journey that led me to HydroXphere. Being at Michigan was also great because I learned how to take the focus and the passion that I had for swimming and apply it elsewhere. And I was one of these kids that was focused on swimming because I knew that's what I knew and that's what I was passionate about. And I had a professor at U of M my senior year. It took me until my senior year, was actually my last semester, and I took a class with him. And he was actually involved in the private sector in city planning, but he brought this knowledge to the classroom. And he kind of encouraged me to apply the way that I thought about swimming to business. And so we had, of course, the term paper, and I didn't know it at the time, but it became the business plan for what we do today. And so I certainly credit him with helping me along in this path. So that was the 2005 to 2008 timeframe. So let's fast forward to 2012. I'm kind of going to gloss over making the team. That was very exciting, and it's one of the better stories, but I'm going to kind of jump to the Olympic Village. When you make the team, it's kind of a whirlwind of events, and it's the end of June. You qualify for the Olympics in Omaha. You go to Knoxville for domestic training camp. Then you go to Vichy, France for international training camp to adjust to the time zone. And then you finally get to the Olympic Village. So in the course of 8 weeks, you're in multiple time zones and you're waking up in different hotels and kind of figuring out where you are and trying to absorb everything in the city, everything that Vichy, France has to share or Knoxville has to share. But you're also kind of, you know, you're looking at the black line at the bottom of the pool. You kind of have that tunnel vision focus. And the story that I like to share, it goes something like this, and in the end, the punchline is it's all relational. It's about this swimming community. And we're in the Olympic Village, and the staff and the coaches explain to us, they say, hey, you know, you're going to make your own decision, but here's the deal. Opening ceremonies are tonight, and you can go if you want. The swim meet starts the next morning. We're the first week, and expect to be on your feet for a couple of hours and be walking several miles. You can go, but know that that's what's going to happen. So needless to say, the swimmers don't go to opening ceremonies. We are actually in the Olympic Village, and we're watching it live on TV with the rest of the world. The only difference is we can do this and look out off the balcony, and we see all the countries parading in, all the teams marching towards the Olympic Stadium. And so we have this kind of fly-on-the-wall perspective where we're a part of it, but we're not a part of it. And so we're sitting in the village, and we had these suites, and there was either 6 or 7 in each suite. And the suite that I was in had 7 USA swimmers, Team USA swimmers. And it was great. I remember sitting there, we're on the couch, we're just being guys, and we're hanging out, and we're watching this thing on TV, joking around. And the camaraderie is coming out, as you might expect, in that sense of community with these guys. And then we go off to bed because, of course, Olympic swimmers have strict bedtimes. And I'm sound asleep, and I'm a heavy sleeper. And so it's quiet, and the meet starts the next day. And all of a sudden, I just hear this incredibly loud noise, and I say I jump out of bed. I jumped out of bed. It just boom, 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 boom. And I jump out, and I'm standing there in the middle of the room, like prepared for anything, not knowing what to do. I hardly know my name at this point, trying to figure out what time zone I'm in and where I'm standing. And I realize that it's the fireworks at the end of opening ceremonies. And it really was only like an hour later. I just thought it was the middle of the night. And the lights are flashing off of the curtains, and it's like cannons. And so I can't do anything. The first thing I have to do is accept, okay, wait a minute. Well, I thought this was the Olympics, but I guess not everything goes according to plan. Fair enough. So I pause. I embrace the fact that I can't control this. So I walk outside onto the balcony to check out the fireworks. And so I walk out, and I actually snapped this picture with the old iPhone I had at the time. And if you can see, the little blue dot in the left is the Olympic Stadium, and then the fireworks are over the village, and those are all the other buildings for each of the teams in each of the countries. And everyone else in the suite slept through this somehow, or at least they didn't come outside, except for another guy, this Michael Phelps guy. He keeps showing up in the story. And he walks out onto the balcony with me, and we kind of joke around for a second, like, what is going on? This is really loud. And then we get kind of quiet. And like I was saying earlier, I knew him from the Michigan days, and one of the Olympic teammates that I knew the longest, in fact, the second, aside from a guy that grew up in Charlotte. I grew up in Raleigh, and we had known each other since we were 8. But I'd known Michael for about 8 years at the time. And so we're joking, and we're watching these fireworks. And it's funny, we're so tunnel vision, we're staring at that black line, right? And it's all performance oriented, business, athletics, whatever the endeavor is, what's the result, right? And we get that, and we're there. That week is going to have a lot of performances. But the great part was, this was so disruptive to that flow, the fireworks, that we had to stop, and we had to pause, and we had to embrace the present moment. And we didn't say a lot, but we didn't have to. We didn't need to talk about all the training that we put in, and man, aren't we so awesome that we're here, and glad-handing one another. But it was this kind of overwhelming, profound sense of camaraderie with Michael and all of the other teammates that were there and the teammates that weren't there. Just the sense of community keeps coming back to me, especially in this moment, in a moment at the Olympics where I really didn't expect it, because we're supposed to be so performance-oriented. And so that is literally frozen in my mind, and I frame this and I put it in my house, even though it's only 3 megapixels or whatever. But there's a great story behind that picture, and it means a lot. And the thing that we like to say at HydroXphere, and the thing we really believe, is that the strength of swimming is in its participation. I get to share this story, and I did a couple of years ago, and I was at a school, and the kindergarten classes didn't come to the assembly, and so I walked around to the kindergarten classes afterwards and passed the gold medal around, and I'm sitting there. I'm actually in a rocking chair. I have like the picture book and everything. And I'm sitting there and passing it around. This little kindergarten boy gets the medal, and he's holding it, and he smiles, and he looks up at me, and he starts to tell me about the medal that he won at the last swim meet that he was at. And it's funny, but that's why we do what we do, because the strength of swimming is in its participation. Everybody from that kindergarten boy up to the Olympic Games are participating. They're fundamentally involved in this culture and in this community, and that's who we want to champion. So the day after my Olympic performance, I was sitting on a rooftop in London with one of our advisors. He actually works at Qualcomm. He's not here today, unfortunately, but we were sitting on a rooftop, and we were talking about HydroXphere. And that was kind of when I knew that I had the conviction and I was compelled to bring this thing to life. I wanted to build this team, and I wanted to make this thing happen. and champion what is a global swimming community. So I got back. I lived in Jacksonville, Florida at the time. I got back and I had a chance to put my money where my mouth was. And the gold medal money that I earned from the race got to go back into HydroXphere. And that was my opportunity to kind of put my skin in the game and say, hey, let's do this. Let's make this happen. And so we did, and we started prototyping. And that was the end of 2012. In the beginning of 2013, I met my partner, Mike Curran. That was 2013, and here we are today. So the swimming community is large, and it is very fractured. There's no nationwide operations or governance, and I'm talking about the recreational level of swimming, where the participation is most high. But despite this, there are leagues in every town and community, and they're doing their thing, they're participating. They are vaguely aware that there's other clusters of people doing similar things around the country and around the world, but it's all about them because that's all they know. It's very siloed. So again, despite the lack of operations and governance, the strength of swimming, again, is in its participation. These communities band together and they make it happen. The idea that it takes a village. In summer swimming, it takes a village. They're volunteer parents, their kids are in the water, and they're trying to run the meet. So let me take you to that pool deck. What does that look like? I like this cartoon. That's kind of what it looks like in cartoon version. So there's usually 6 to 8 swimmers competing race by race over several hundred races for a swim meet. Their parents are the volunteers trying to run the meet. And then you have the kids not swimming, so a couple hundred kids not swimming, running around the pool deck waiting to swim. And you have all the other parents that aren't a part of the operations trying to figure out what's going on. It's a little confusion. Despite this, again, the strength of swimming is in its participation. And there's meets like this operating all over the country, like I said, in Raleigh and greater Raleigh area. During the summer, there's about 20,000 swimmers that do this week by week. And in North Carolina, it looks the same in the western part of the state, and South Carolina, and the Midwest, and here in Seattle. That's summer swimming. So what's the problem? It's a purely manual process today. So in 1967, I believe, the electronic touchpads were introduced to the market for the first time to test them out the year before the Olympic Games in Mexico City. And domestically today, about 6% of the market has adopted those. And the rest of it, which is where our focus is, it's a purely manual process. Clipboards, stopwatches, long swim meets, and usually the computer mom or the computer dad that happens to have the skill set and the willingness to take all of that information and put it into some sort of system to try to make sense of it. And usually they do one of two things. The first is what you see on the right, the computer dad or the computer mom. And on average, there's about 3,000 data points that need to be collected and tabulated at each swim meet. And so you're seeing the end result there with the dad with the look on his face. He's gotten all the paper. A lot of it's wet. Some of it fell in the pool. And it's his job to get that into a system that doesn't work. It's not optimized for their use case, and he's trying to make sense of it so he can turn it around and have this information ready for the next week, the next Tuesday night, the next Saturday morning when their next swim meet is. So there's got to be a better way. So this is our kind of startup screen for Meet Central. And today you can see it's focused around just the operations of the meet. And this talk is really about the why and not the how, and would love to answer more of the how questions afterwards. But you can see here it says starter, scorekeeper, timer, and stroke and turn judge. And those are the operations, the fundamental operations that have to occur at each swim meet. And so that's where our focus is today. I was talking with one of our advisors earlier, and probably the best example of why AllJoin has worked well for us so far is in the pre-meet setup when they get to the pool deck. We call it the huddle. And so you can imagine what's going on. There's about 8 lanes in the pool, so there could be 8 timers. There could be 16 timers, and they could have 2 per lane. There's 1 starter, there's 1 scorekeeper, and then there's 2 to 4 stroke and turn judges. So you have a couple dozen parent volunteers, and they have this app downloaded, and they got it in a little lanyard around their neck, like y'all have today, and they're going, okay, let's do this. And the great part about AllJoin is all of those devices signing in and huddling, as we like to call it. It takes what was a hectic, conditioned to be anxious moment for this real market, this living and breathing market, and the timer hits join the swim meet, and it does its thing and it spins, and the next screen that comes over says relax, the starter will start your clock. And they kind of joke about it, or they'll look up at me if I'm there because I want to see what's going on, and they say, relax? We're not supposed to relax. This is weird. This is weird. So it's a great example of the technology kind of being married with this fundamental human behavior and seeing what the result is and seeing it solve that problem. Anxious, no longer anxious. And that's been a lot of fun to see. So again, Meet Central isn't cool because an Olympian created it. And Meet Central isn't cool because we use the latest technology. It's cool because it solves problems. It marries that fundamental human behavior with the technology, and it solves problems, and that's been great to see. And it's really cool because it enables for us what we like to call the ripple effect. And this part's fun, and this is the part that I'll enjoy talking to any of you about and would love to, because these outer layers, if you can read that, are the layers that everybody here knows about and everybody's really good at. The kind of the socialization aspect and the gamification and what can go on when you take this fundamental behavior and you capture it. But we call it the ripple effect because in the middle there, the point of origin is very clear for our market, and that is when the swimmer's hand hits the wall at the end of the race and the race is over. Before Meet Central, there was no way to capture the data at that point of origin. And so that's the fundamental shift, and that's what AllJoin makes possible. So now that you're taking those 3,000 data points and you're actually capturing them at the point of origin instead of handwriting and runners and the proverbial game of telephone going on across a pool deck, it's all just happening. And so we don't have to get bogged down in what may or may not go on the pool deck. The pool deck begins to take care of itself, and the anxiousness begins to go away, and the behavior of this market starts to see this as, dare I say, fun to go and stand on a hot, humid pool deck for 3 or 4 hours and run a swim meet, because they know what it used to be and they see what it is or what it's beginning to be for them. And so you have that operations level, then you have the spectators there, and then of course the post-swim meet things like management. And then of course the gamification or the socialization that's possible with all the constituents, the coaches, the swimmers, the parents, everybody. And so you can see how that just kind of builds on itself. And today there's obviously big schisms between each of these layers, or some of these outer layers not even being possible. So what's your ripple effect? Where can you harness the data at its point of origin for you? I think we have a compelling use case because I think what we do isn't novel in the sense that there are other markets like this, so-called niche markets, where the technology is just now at the point where it can do things like this, and it can start to solve those problems. Not up here in the stratosphere where you can manage a swim meet and then hope it gets to the pool deck and back again. It's actually there interacting. It's literally in the hands of each of these timers. And I don't think that's novel. I think there's lots of other use cases out there that we're going to see kind of on this more micro level. And we're going to see what the power of this technology really is and how you can really be deep and narrow in what may be a niche market, but really open up all sorts of possibilities for the constituents. So the last thing that I ask swimmers when I'm talking to them or their parents, say, what can you be best in the world at? Because I believe that everybody can be best in the world at something. And when we're 12 and 14 and 16, you can embrace that notion, or you can scoff and laugh it off as cliche. And when we're 30 and 40 and 50, you can embrace that notion, or you can laugh and scoff it off as cliche. But I really believe that. What can you be best in the world at? I think the common thread here today is the fact, I think we're all here because there's this idea that there's got to be a better way. And I'm looking forward to exploring that with you this week. Thank you.